Thank you, Mr. President. We understand the motives of many delegations who supported or co-sponsored today's draft resolution referring the Syrian file to the ICC. We share their emotions caused by the crisis in Syria, which has been dragging on for far too long. It is hard to see the destruction, loss of life, and suffering of people. It is more difficult to figure out the motives of France, which initiated the draft and put it to a vote, fully aware in advance of the fate it would meet. There is no dearth of complaints about the lack of unity on the Security Council among the P5 on Syria. Indeed, when that unity is present, we manage to achieve concrete positive results. Among them, undoubtedly, is the Security Council Resolution 2118 on the destruction of the Syrian chemical stockpile. That program is about to be successfully completed. Another important benchmark was the Security Council Resolution 2139 on humanitarian issues. P5 unity is important. After all, it is the reason for which France has been pushing for the P5's engagement in the political settlement of the crisis, having failed, however, to advance any positive substantive ideas. Then why deal such a blow to the P5 unity at this stage? Is it just to try once again to create a pretext for armed intervention in the Syrian conflict? One could not overlook that the head of the French diplomacy saw it fit to take advantage of his recent visit to Washington to publicly criticize the United States for refusing to shower missiles and bombs on Syria last fall. It should be pointed out that this damage to the P5 unity is inflicted at a critical point in the efforts to find a political solution to the Syrian crisis. An involuntary hiatus created by the resignation of Dr. Brahimi should be used for an in-depth, fair, and collective analysis of the situation, for seeking out any possible reserves to break the vicious circle of violence. Here, there is food for thought contained in the political testament left behind by Dr. Brahimi to the Security Council on May 13th. This is exactly what the draft Security Council resolution tabled by Russia aims at, to foster the process of local truces. The draft is not to the liking of our Western colleagues. They claim that settlements already achieved cannot be used as standards. One cannot but recall a Russian saying, "A bad peace is better than a good quarrel." And what are our Western colleagues proposing instead? Talk, good for naive people, that they will be supplying new types of weapons to good opposition groups only. Their list of good guys now includes the Islamic Front, which has openly confessed to a series of brutal terrorist attacks, including a recent one in Aleppo, that claimed the lives of dozens of civilians. I would note that our Western colleagues are demanding that cross-border humanitarian deliveries to Syria be conducted through border crossings controlled by the Islamic Front. At the same time, they have long blocked any condemnation by the Security Council of numerous terrorist attacks committed in Syria. Pursuing the regime change by force in Syria at all costs precipitated the drawing out of the crisis and undermines the Geneva negotiations. It is telling that Ahmed Jarba, leader of the National Coalition, did not make an effort to show up to the Geneva negotiations and instead travels the world in search of weapons. And Ahmad al-Khatib, his predecessor, was removed from office just for attempting to launch talks with Damascus to stop bloodshed. In this context, it is striking that there is not a single word on the political settlement and the negotiations process amongst Syrians in the communiqué issued on May 15th following the meeting of the so-called London 11. And the Western Troika took great pains to dissuade the Secretary General and his special envoy from calling another round of Geneva negotiations. What justice can one talk about when the overriding policy aims at escalating the conflict? The draft resolution rejected today reveals an attempt to use the ICC to further inflame political passions and lay the groundwork, in the end, for eventual outside military intervention. It should be noted that the so-called Caesar report, used to build up tension upstream of the introduction of the draft was based on unconfirmed information obtained from unverifiable sources and therefore cannot serve as a platform for taking such a serious decision. One cannot ignore the fact that the last time the Security Council referred a case to the ICC, that is the Libyan file through Resolution 1970, it didn't help resolve the crisis, but instead added fuel to the flames of conflict. And after the cessation of hostilities, the ICC, to put it mildly, did not rise to the occasion. The ICC does not contribute to a return of normalcy or justice to Libya by evading the most pressing issues. The death of civilians as a result of NATO bombardments was somehow left outside of its scope. Our colleagues from NATO countries arrogantly refused to address this issue altogether. They even refused to apologize. And they wax eloquent about shame. They advocate fighting impunity, but are themselves practicing a policy of all permissiveness. The United States frequently shows the path to the ICC to others, but is reluctant to accede to the Rome Statute itself. And in today's draft, the United States insisted on an exemption for itself and its citizens. Great Britain is a party to the ICC, but for some reason is unenthusiastic about the exploration in the court of crimes committed by the British nationals during the Iraq War. If the United States and the United Kingdom together were to refer their Iraqi file to the ICC, the world would see that they are truly against impunity. Mr. President, we proceed from the premise that the Geneva Communiqué of June 30, 2012 remains at the core of efforts to settle the Syrian crisis. The Communiqué interprets the principles of accountability and national reconciliation as interrelated, leaving the leading role in this process to Syrians themselves. We are convinced that justice in Syria will eventually prevail. Those guilty of perpetrating grave crimes will be punished. But in order for this to happen, peace is first needed, first and foremost. Russia will continue to exert every effort to stop the bloodshed as soon as possible. We call upon our Western colleagues to abandon their futile, dead-end policy of endlessly escalating the Syrian crisis. We invite everyone who truly value the interests of the Syrian people to join us in the efforts aimed at a Syrian political settlement. Making judgments, as done today by France, that the political process is dead, is just irresponsible. This is indeed a treachery in the face of the Syrian people. Thank you.
I thank the representative of the Russian Federation for his statement. Now give the floor to the representative